Welcome back to TLDR's daily briefing for Wednesday, the 26th of February, 2025. In today's episode, we cover the US-Ukraine minerals deal, Chile's nationwide blackouts, and South Korea's fertility rate. But first, an announcement on defence spending from the UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer. In a press conference yesterday, Prime Minister Keir Starmer announced that his government will aim to increase defence spending to 2.5% of GDP by 2027, with a desire to reach 3% at some point in the next parliament, i.e. after the next election, presumed to be in 2029. If he's successful, this would mark the largest increase in defence spending since the end of the Cold War. As things stand, defence spending accounts for roughly 2.3% of GDP. The 0.2% increase is expected to cost the UK about £13.4 billion annually. To pay for it, the Prime Minister has announced that he plans to cut the foreign aid budget. This will be reduced from 0.5% of gross national income to 0.3% by 2027. While this move has been welcomed by the White House, with US Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth suggesting it was a strong step from an enduring partner, it's been criticised by a number of other groups, particularly by charities, some of whom have described it as a betrayal. Additionally, the chair of the International Development Committee, Labour MP Sarah Champion, suggested that this was deeply short-sighted and doesn't make anyone safer. This decision comes in the wake of the changing international landscape, one in which the US looks set to step back from providing as much security to Europe, leaving the continent significantly more vulnerable. In response to this, countries across Europe look set to significantly overhaul their defence policies. Starmer's recent decision seems to fit into this trend. Asked if the US president had pushed him to act, the Prime Minister insisted that it was very much his decision, but that the last few weeks have accelerated my thinking. On the whole, this seems to be something that has united the government with the opposition. Discussing Starmer's speech, the leader of the opposition, Kemi Badenoch, welcomed the move, telling the House of Commons this is absolutely right. You're listening to TLDR's daily briefing. If you want more explainers on what's happening in the world, then you should check out TLDR's YouTube channels. Today, we released videos on what happens when the Pope dies, and whether NATO can survive without the US. You can find those videos linked in the description or show notes for this episode, or by searching for TLDR on YouTube. In a surprising turn of events, Ukraine has agreed to a minerals deal with the US that officials in Kyiv hope will improve relations with the Trump administration, leading to future guarantees of security. It comes after the US dropped its demand for the rights to $500 billion of potential revenue from the deal, which will grant the US access to billions of dollars worth of critical elements and mineral deposits in Ukraine, including lithium and titanium, as well as sizable coal, gas, oil, and uranium deposits. According to Ukrainian officials, the terms of the agreement are now more favourable to Ukraine. Reports suggest the deal would see the creation of a jointly owned fund, to which Ukraine would contribute 50% of proceeds from the future monetization of state-owned mineral resources, oil and gas, which would then be used to rebuild Ukraine's post-war infrastructure and economy. However, there is no mention of US security guarantees, which Kyiv had originally insisted on as part of a deal. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky will travel to Washington, D.C. on Friday to meet with Trump and formalize the agreement. Over to Latin America now, where power has been restored in Chile following near-nationwide blackouts on Tuesday, which led the government to declare a state of emergency. On Wednesday morning, a curfew over much of the country was lifted, with 90% of electricity restored to homes, according to the power systems operator. The outage, which came in the middle of Chile's summer, impacted around 8 million households in 14 out of 16 regions, from the northernmost Chilean port of Arica to the southern Los Lagos agricultural region. It caused disruption to public transport services, businesses and mines, with hospitals and prisons forced to run on emergency generators. Chilean President Gabriel Boric blamed the power cuts on the country's privately owned electricity companies, calling the situation outrageous and claiming that the firms don't do their job. And finally, in other news, South Korea's fertility rate has risen for the first time in 9 years, as a post-pandemic surge in marriages gives new hope that the country with the world's fastest aging population may have turned a corner. For context, in 2023, South Korea's fertility rate hit 0.72, the lowest in the world and far below the stable replacement rate of 2.1. In 2024, however, it ticked up to 0.75, still the lowest in the world, but the first time it has risen since 2015. In response to the crisis, South Korea has rolled out various measures to encourage young people to get married and have children. In June, the now impeached president Yoon Suk-yeol announced the creation of a new Ministry of Population to tackle the country's demographic crisis, including low birth rates, an aging population, and workforce and immigration challenges. That's all for today. We'll be back with you tomorrow, so make sure you're subscribed wherever you listen. In the meantime, you can check out the latest episode of our podcast, The World Leader Leaderboard, where we discuss which heads of government are doing well and who's doing badly every week. You can find the link to the episode in the podcast description. This was a TLDR news production, hosted by Georgina Findlay, written by Ben Blissett and Georgina Findlay, and produced by Scarlett Watchorn. Thanks for listening. We'll be back again tomorrow.